Hello, everyone, and welcome to an ALEC TV live stream. I'm Catherine Mortensen from ALEC Public Affairs. With me today in the studio is Karla Jones. She is our policy lead for all things related to federal lands. And joining us remotely from the great state of Utah are Representatives Ken Ivory and Keven Stratton. We spoke with Ken last week as we looked at some of the issues regarding federal land mismanagement, what those problems are, and why these Western states are fighting so hard to get sort of the management control back from the federal government. So today we want to look more at what that would look like and why it is so important. There's national security issues involved. Karla will get into some of that. We just want to thank you for joining us. And if you're not familiar with ALEC, we are the nation's largest nonpartisan organization made up of state and local lawmakers, all dedicated to the idea of federalism, free markets, and limited government. So welcome to our guests. And I think that the first thing I just want to ask is a little bit of a follow-up from last week, because last week when we spoke to you, Representative Ivory, you were in Lincoln, Nebraska, attending a summit to look into the so-called 30 by 30 plan. That is where the federal government is proposing taking over 30% of all lands. So basically it would mean they would take on more private lands and they would turn that into conservation and basically lock it up and not allow it to be used for, resource management. If you want to just sort of update us on what happened at that 3030 summit, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for continuing to address this important subject. Governor Ricketts was the host of the conference, and then U.S. Senator Kramer was there. Former Secretary of the Interior David Bernhardt was there as well. Leaders from around the nation. Basically, as you mentioned, if you think of 30 by 30, to put the most stringent federal restrictions on 30% of all land and water by the year 2030, and then keep in mind, that's just their interim goal. The next step is 50 by 50, 50% of all land and water by 2050. And Governor Ricketts made a really good point. Imagine if you went in and someone decides they want to just block off 30% of your home or 50% of your home. And that may be the entrance to your home. It may be the kitchen of your home, but just indiscriminately, they draw a line and lock off 50% of your home. How might that impact your life? If you can't get through that room, it may not even matter that you control the other 70 or 30%. If you can't get through critical areas of your home or critical places to maybe the water heater or the power shutoff is in a different part of the home. That's really what kind of happens in our state when in Utah, 65% of the land is already federally controlled. But in other states, when the federal government comes in and controls 30% of the land, the impact for all of the lands around it is just like as if it were your home. If someone indiscriminately locked up 30% of your home, maybe you can't get to the kitchen even though you have the bedroom. Maybe you can't get to the garage or the front door even though you have the kitchen and the living room. And that's what we see in our state, for example. We can't run emergency communication systems in our state, power lines, roads. We can't care for the health and well-being of our forest, which is also our water system and supply in the second most arid state in the nation. And so we talked a little bit about that last week, but it becomes a really big issue that we've lived with since our statehood in the West, but more and more other states are going to begin to see more and more of this as you see this push for conservation easements with federal protections on them. It really begins to impact what you can do with the land all around the protected land as well.
Thanks so much, Kat, and thank you, Representatives Ivory and Stratton, for joining us today. And Representative Stratton, when I met up with you earlier this month in Utah, you came over to me and started talking about 30 by 30. And the Biden administration's, a lot of people are calling it a land grab. Can you explain to the people listening why you might see it as a land grab and what alarms you about this plan?
One of the challenges we're facing as we look at this current focus on ideology is really what is the basis, and as you look at it, the motivation seems to be concern for the climate certainly our climate is changing. It's always changing. We recognize that, and we need to be sensitive, be wise stewards. However, having this concept of we're going to lock up 30% of our land and water, what that translates into is great large swaths, sizes of many, even larger than the whole eastern states. Many of the eastern states out here in the West can be put into some of that intense regulatory scheme that has been put in place by our federal counterparts. The challenge with that is specifically I'll give you a great example. Last summer, we had probably one of the worst and most unhealthy air quality summers we've had in recent history here along the Wasatch Front. The source of that was not fossil fuels. The source of that was the mega fires that are taking place here in the West during the summer. And the challenge that we have with the 30 by 30, as Representative Ivory said earlier, it's a desire to put it in the most stringent and most restrictive regulatory schemes that we have at disposal. What that does is it prohibits any type of effective, wise stewardship and management and care of the land that translates into all the impact that comes from the quality of air. Utah is one of the larger states in the nation. We're approximately 54 million acres. We have approximately 4 times that amount of acreage in our nation, in our national forests. Literally, in the amount of years you can count on one hand recently, we have had mega wildfires burn that much land. 1/4, the size of the state of Utah almost, of our national forests. That is a result of absolutely failed management practices. It's not, it deals with the fuel that's there. We're not dealing properly, caring for and being wise stewards. And so it translates into a policy, certainly a policy that is from our perspective misguided, that translates into the locking down of the lands in a way that they can't be properly managed and cared for, first of all. And the tremendous resources are so critical to our national security, to our independence, to our affordability and reliability of energy, and all that comes and feeds into our quality of life are greatly impacted. So not only do we have the challenges with health, safety, and welfare because of the air quality, because of the mega fires that actually release more carbon in the atmosphere than we can ever do with burning fossil fuels. You also have the locking down and tying up of the resources there. So what we're trying to say is, look, it really makes sense to have those making the decisions related to the land closest to the land. There's a fundamental principle. Government closest to the people is best for the people. And we have specific proven cases where you see state managed lands or tribal managed lands with a direct line with federally managed lands, and it is like night and day on what's taking place. Our federal government is in place for some very good and appropriate things, but to be a macro land manager is not what the federal government has set up. That's left to the states, and it impacts the quality of life in very specific ways, each citizen, but also the way that we're trying to macro manage this impacts our national security and what we're trying to do as a people, and protect the future generations. So how's that? That just get me, put a quarter in, and I could go on for hours. But that's a good skim across the water.
That's excellent, Representative Stratton. And as if to underscore the point you were making about local management, the
Correct.
fires that began in New Mexico, the Hermit's Peak, Calf Canyon, Hermit's Peak began because of either a Bureau of Land Management or U.S. Forest Service prescribed burn. And when I went to this firefighter website, you had all these comments from these people in New Mexico saying, what were they thinking? Have they put the arsonists in charge? nobody would do a prescribed burn during the windy season. So that just underscores the point that you were making.
You have, and that's the point. That's the point of making macro decisions that need local common sense and input. And again, it's not about the intent of the people and those involved. We're not saying it is a broken structure. It's like trying to use a baseball bat on the golf course. It's a system that has proven over the decades to be very, very ineffective and inefficient in doing right by the wonderful treasures that we have and them being their very best version.
And Representative Ivory, one of the things that the Biden administration pledged to do with 30 by 30 is to consult with the states and the localities. Has that been happening? I suspect not, because for over a year now, you've been sounding the alarm on how 30 by 30 erodes federalism.
Yeah, right, Karla. I mean, to Representative Stratton's point, there's no constitutional authority for the federal government to engage in broad scale land control management over the United States. The Constitution in Article 1, Section 817 says the federal government would have control over the District of Columbia and then over such land that it purchases with the consent of the state legislature, and then only for certain purposes: forts, dockyards, arsenals, batteries, other needful buildings. And it made it very clear. And so people like to read the property clause in Article 4, that is the rights and protections of the state, to say somehow that grants the federal government this complete and total authority over the land. It just simply was never written that way. But to your point, in the Executive Order 14008, it was one of the first executive orders that President Biden signed on January 27th last year. It spells out a number of plans that every single agency would be engaged in. They called it a whole of government approach. So the Department of Education has a 30 by 30 decarbonization plan. NOAA, the National Institutes of Health, the SEC, you just saw the rulemaking come out of the SEC a couple of weeks ago. Every single government agency is ordered to have a 30 by 30 decarbonization plan, which is unusual in itself. It's unprecedented. But then in the plans, it spells out repeatedly that they'll coordinate with the state and local governments. And I've been speaking on this, as you mentioned, throughout the Western states over the last year. And in fact, even last week in Nebraska, I said, show of hands, how many of you, and there were a number of state and local leaders throughout the Western United States, how many of you have known about, let alone been involved in any of these coordinations? And not a single one of them. This has been driven from the top down and from the administration down. So again, power centralizing to the national government, and at the national government level, purely to the executive. And that's exactly what our founders were trying to prevent and ward off when they divided and distributed power in our constitutional structure that was, as Justice Kennedy called it, our unique contribution to political science, in that division and distribution and limit of power to various levels of government.
And representatives, I want to turn next to the issue of national security, because this is something that I don't think enough Americans fully appreciate, why the management of our federal lands is so critical. We import more than 50% of the rare earths elements and critical elements. These elements are essential to green technologies and addressing climate change. Many are imported from China, and most cobalt that we get here in the US is coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a nation that Karla explained to us last week is far from stable. And in fact, it's on the verge of being a failed state. So I don't think that's a great, reliable energy partner for us. And America's federal lands have a lot of these elements. And I'll just show the screen here, and we can go through some of these. And perhaps, Karla, you know better than I do what some of these specific elements are used for and why we need to start getting them from our own natural resources.
Well, basically, everything that underpins our innovation economy and, frankly, our green economy, which is one of the tragic ironies in this whole thing, are made up of rare earth minerals and critical minerals. All the ones where we are 100% dependent. Well, if you want an electric vehicle and you want a battery in that electric vehicle, you need a whole lot of the elements that are listed here on which the US is 100% dependent. There are another, I think it's 10 minerals where we are between 75% and 97% dependent on imports. And before you call me a protectionist, my task force deals in international trade. I believe in globalization. However, if COVID and the Russian war against Ukraine have taught us nothing, it's that we need to secure our supply chains. And our supply chains to these critical minerals are vital for growing both the innovation and the green economy. So when environmentalists talk about how we don't want to do mining in the United States and mining on our public lands, well, where on earth do they think the mining is being done? Do they really believe that China is paying more attention to the environment when they mine than the United States would? And wouldn't it be better for us to be at least more self-sufficient in these minerals? And part of that would involve not just mining on public lands and environmentally sensitive mining on public lands, but it would also involve setting up the processing facilities to deal with these elements.
I just want to ask Representative Stratton a question, because I think we've all clearly established that local control is best. The people closest to the land know best how to work it and what needs, what the needs are. So how do we go about this process of transferring the management from the federal bureaucrats in DC to the local people? Are we seeing that anywhere? And what would that look like?
We've really done something of first impression, meaning it's the first time it's been done statewide in the state of Utah. We have 29 counties, and those 29 counties have spread throughout Utah. Our above ground resources are just tremendous and a treasure, but also we have tremendous resources below the ground. And in Utah, we've learned how to be responsible and wise and good stewards of caring for that is above ground as we harvest appropriately the things below the ground. We have put together county by county, 29 different county resource management plans over the last 6 years. And then we combine that up into a state resource management plan. Now, all our federal agencies are required, if they're going to be over a piece of land, that they put together a resource management plan or a land management plan. We have all those in place, and not only those in place, but also the opportunity to have studied and inventoried all the resources and put this plan together, approved, by the way, in a nonpartisan way from both sides of the aisle, and had public input over several years creating these plans. And what it would look like is it's not, turn the management over the state of Utah or a local jurisdiction without having accountability and stewardship and evaluation. That's not what it is. We're fully ready to do that and willing to do that. And so that's, in answer specifically to your question, that's what that would look like. But let me just tell you a quick story in response to what Karla was just talking about with our rare earth minerals. When I was a little boy in elementary school, I remember we had energy crisis. At that time, the narrative was that we're not going to have global warming, but we're going to have global freezing. Okay, that was the best science at the time. We're going to have global freezing, and with the problem and the challenge was we were dependent on the Near East nations for our fuel. For the first time in my lifetime, the decade since I was in elementary school, during the last administration, we were a net energy exporter. The ideology of this current administration has reversed that. And so what we have is we not only say we're not going to do any mining, but we're going to leave mining to those that don't have the care for the human spirit, people that we do. You have child labor, you have all sorts of lack of oversight taking place. You have China and these developing companies opening up coal burning plants with inferior coal that they're burning because we're shutting down everything with the superior coal here. Certainly in Utah, we have the cleanest burning coal in the world. We're shutting that down to burn inferior coal. And it just makes no sense in the notion of being sustainable and wise stewards of the resources that we've been given that are in our control. So that's part of that narrative. And you look at the opportunity, we can be completely energy independent, and we can also be rare earth mineral independent. There is not a nation on this earth that doesn't have richer resources than the United States of America. None. And if you want to destroy our nation from any perspective, how do you do it? You do it from within, and you shut down and cut off the availability and the path to harvest responsibly and wisely the resources that are there in a manner that's with the technology and the manners that's not surpassed anywhere in the world. The second one I want to make is we passed 2 resolutions with our Federalist Commission. One is Utah is here, ready, and willing to solve this rare earth mineral. The second was, if we're really concerned about the climate, let's start taking care of our land. Let's start taking care of our forests and our grasslands, because you know what? You can sequester, you can suck all the carbon out of the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution by having our lands healthy, which goes again to what I said with the fires and stuff. We're upside down in our focus. And I have to ask myself, are you really concerned about the environment? Or are you more concerned about control? What's the agenda here? And if we're really concerned about the environment, the states will have the answer. That's how I would respond to that.
And Representative Ivory, kind of a 2-part question to you. First of all, you sent me an article about how the Biden administration was invoking the Defense Production Act for mining on public lands. Shouldn't the states be making that decision? And then if you could segue into, how does control management of public lands by the states, how is that a federalism issue? Like, get into the enabling acts. I think a lot of our listeners don't understand the history behind how we got to this place.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, great big amen to everything that Representative Stratton had to say. I mean, if you think about just the nature of the policy, it's as if they don't want to starve, but they don't want you to go to the store or cook any food. They want you to stand out on the street corner with a cardboard sign and say, we'll beg for food. It's not even we'll work for food anymore. We have, as Representative Stratton said, we have the rare earth elements, we have the forest, we have the fuel, we have everything here. 90% of the rare earth elements are either mined and or processed by China. And they've said clearly, they've said repeatedly, we will use this as a tool of reprisal. We will use this as a bargaining chip. And so if we're going down that road and making ourselves completely dependent. So to your points, how is this a federalism issue, and how do we deal with this in the states? I don't want people to miss what Representative Stratton was saying. This resource management plan that he let out on the legislation, every single county in Utah, 29 counties, did very extensive resource management planning, and then we compiled that in the state. I think it's something like 1,000-page, in excess of 1,000-page document, very detailed resource management plan for every single county as to how we deal with the resource, what areas are best for conservation, what areas are best for production, areas best for mixed use, recreation, mining, conservation, hunting and fishing. All of that is considered in these plans by the people that know the land, that live on the land, that know the areas. I'll tell you a quick story. I had dear friend who was down at Bryce Canyon with her horses. Her husband had just passed away. He was in the legislature with us, and she was really just kind of lost and distraught. She went out for a horseback ride and trailered her horses down there. And she called me. I'm up in Salt Lake, and she says, "Oh, Ken, I need your help. I've lost my horses. I don't know where they are." And I'm 3.5, 4 hours away. And I said, "Well, I don't know what to do, but let me call the county commissioner." And I called Commissioner Leland Pollock, who's the county commissioner in Garfield County. I said, "Leland, anything you can do to help?" And he said, "Well, wait a minute. You said she was outside of Ruby's Inn by Bryce Canyon." I said, "Yeah, that's where she said she lost him." He says, "Well, I know right where the horses are." And sure enough, he got on the phone and told her right where to go. And that's exactly where the horses are, because he knows that land so well. The county commissioners know where the horses are. They know where the opportunities are. They know how to manage the land and care for the land. You get a bureaucrat from New Jersey that comes out, with a freshly minted college degree and doesn't know anything about our forests, our land, our makeup, the geography, the topography, the geology. And we get these issues that we have. We're compounding problem on top of problem, and the federal government solution is another federal solution to compound the problems they've already created. In terms of a federalism issue, and this is really the heart of, I believe, every challenge, problem, predicament that we have in our nation right now. It's not left, right. It's not Republican, conservative. It's not liberal, progressive. The biggest problem we have right now is the balance of governing power. The founders set out to curb governing power so that they could elevate self-governance. They said that the people are sovereign. That was revolutionary. It was radical. The people are sovereign. And for the sovereign people to self-govern, they created a brand new kind of government where there were two governments, not one. And it was the balance that was so critical. The few and defined powers delegated to the national government, the numerous and indefinite powers reserved to the states. Madison told us in Federalist 45, and in Federalist 51, he said the name of this government is not just a republic, it's a compound republic. In a republic, the power is divided between two governments, or in a republic, the power is divided among three branches: executive, legislative, judicial. In the compound republic of America, the power is first divided between two governments, and they control each other as a double security to the rights of the people. Well, in that compact of government, in that solemn document, our Constitution, they delegated very few and defined powers. And as Keven said, there are things that the federal government does and only the federal government should do, and they should do those well, and quit trying to do better the things that they shouldn't be doing at all, like land management and dealing with the economy and employment and jobs and things of that nature. In the Enabling Act, Karla, that you mentioned, the states, and particularly Utah and all of the Western states, had the exact same terms in their statehood agreement called an Enabling Act. That was the agreement that Congress put out to say, do you want to be in a state? These are the terms that you need to agree to be authorized by Congress to become a state. Utah's Enabling Act is word for word the exact same document as North and South Dakota. It has the exact same terms as every state since Louisiana and Florida and Illinois and Missouri in terms of the disposal of the land. There's a provision in that document that says the people of the state forever disclaim right and title to the unappropriated public lands, comma, until title thereto shall have been extinguished. Many of the people that want the federal government to retain the lands, they'll cite the first part of that sentence. The people of the state forever disclaim right and title to the unappropriated public lands. And they say, you see right there, you gave it up. No, the rest of the sentence is until title thereto shall be extinguished. The language came from Louisiana. In the Louisiana Enabling Act, you had France had issued claims to land, and Spain had issued claims to land, and England had issued claims to land. The United States had issued claims to land, and there were people claiming rights to land from all kinds of sources. At statehood, they said, we need to clarify all of these claims and finalize them. You people bring all of your claims forward, and if you haven't done it by the time of statehood, you forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated public lands. It doesn't say the state of Louisiana, it says the people. And so the people, if they hadn't brought their claims forward by then, they had released them, they had relinquished them. The state still had the claim that the federal government would act as a trustee and dispose of the land, which they did for all of the states east of the Rocky Mountains. Illinois was 96% federally controlled for decades. Missouri, 96%, 90% federally controlled. In fact, Florida used to complain. Their legislature sent resolutions to Congress saying they're the worst off of all the Western states because the federal government is controlling all their land. They can't control their economy. Their children are leaving the state because they're the worst off of all of the Western states. They battled and made the federal government comply with the terms of their statehood. And in the Western states, we're simply asking to be treated equally, to have statehood equality, be treated exactly the same on those statehood agreements as all the states east of the Rockies.
Representative, I just want to share a map. This is from the Congressional Research Service. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but this describes all the different federal agencies. We have Fish and Wildlife, National Park Service,
Bureau of Land Management.
Yeah, that's, and it's kind of hard to see because I feel like the map is a little small, but Bureau of Land Management overwhelmingly controls the land in where there is federal control in these Western states. And, you know, I just think that people on the East Coast don't fully appreciate just how much of our Western lands are under federal control and the problems that arise there. Karla, did you want to talk about what is happening in Canada,
Yes.
in the Yukon region?
Yes.
Because there is a model for transferring management back to the local level. And it's worked very well in Canada.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to echo what you were saying about people in the East just don't get it. I got in a cab in DC and started talking about a presentation I was going to make on transfer of management of public lands. The guy had no idea it was even a thing. Got in a similar cab outside the airport in Salt Lake City, told him I was going to a conference devoted to this, and I didn't get a word in edgewise. He talked about all the things that the Bureau of Land Management was doing wrong, all the way from the airport into downtown Salt Lake City. So that's number one. Number two, yes, Canada has an amazing story to tell. Basically, their provinces devolved, or rather, Ottawa transferred control of provincial lands to provincial control back about 100 years ago. But the territories, Ottawa still controlled the land within the territories until around the year 2002. When Yukon, I think, signed the first devolution agreement, Northwest Territories signed the next one. Well, the results are in. At this point, Yukon has the lowest unemployment rate in all of Canada. Northwest Territories' unemployment rate is similarly good. And the way they're doing it is by maximizing both ecotourism and mining. So the Canadian territories have proven that you can maximize both environmental stewardship and economic stewardship simultaneously, because ecotourism wouldn't be doing really well if they were devastating the environment, which clearly they are not. And the other interesting thing about Canada's story is that they devolved the territory in much the same way that Nevada would plan to devolve, would request land from the federal government. So, for example, Nevada is one of the states that has requested management over the select federal lands within their borders. Currently, the federal government owns more than 80% of Nevada. And they have a graduated devolution scheme where they ask for the most lucrative parcels first and then less lucrative parcels later. And that way they're able to bankroll the less lucrative parcels. And that's exactly what the territories have done in Canada. And if we want to know what our post-transfer of management of public lands to state control looks like, I suspect the Canadian territories are exactly what it would look like.
Can I just give you an example of why it affects everyone in the United States? We have counties in Utah and throughout the West that have less than 10% taxable land. I mean, let that sink in for just a second. Garfield County has 3% taxable land because of the federal control of land. Well, the way they educate children and the way they deal with search and rescue and police and fire is you all in the East are paying payments in lieu of taxes that they would otherwise generate. And they would generate much more in property tax if the lands were simply allowed to be under the control of the local governments. The other thing that you're paying, we've talked about considerably, is the wildfires. You're paying for the privilege of the federal government managing our forests for maximum combustion. You all get to pay for that environmentally, constitutionally, and economically. And there's a simple solution, as Karla just pointed out.
All right, Representative Stratton, do you have any last words, something you want to get across to people about why it would be better to have local and state management of these lands as compared to bureaucrats from DC making decisions?
Well, what I would say, if we care about our lands, our public lands, and first of all, let me just share, in Utah, we're a public land state. We treasure our public lands. We want them to be the very best they can be. And it has been proven again and again and again. If we want those lands to be their very best version, it's by having that local control and that local accountability and that local stewardship that will reach that end. You can't dispute that. You can't dispute it. We need to lay aside the hunger for power and set down, lay aside our pride and recognize what the best approach and the best procedure is. The system we have now is completely broken and inadequate. And the states are willing and ready and able and want to be accountable. We'll get it done. So that's what I would say.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. I know I have learned a lot, and I hope that people are watching, and I hope that your message really does spread across the country, particularly to other Western lawmakers. And I know this.
Oh, I think particularly to other East Coast lawmakers. Okay.
Yeah.
They're the ones that need to learn about this. I think Western lawmakers understand it. It's almost part of your guys' DNA.
Yeah.
But I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time to meet with us today. And this has been a really inspiring ALEC TV segment. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. And if I could just say one thing to both of you, I'm actually a Utah native. My father's family came to Utah in the 1930s from New Mexico to work in the Bingham mine. And then some of them went down a little bit south to Price and Helper. So I know firsthand the benefit of mining and how it has blessed generations in my family. And I know that those resources are just a game changer, and they have been for so long. And so it's certainly changed the course of my family's history. You know, they came up from a very small town north of Santa Fe where there was just no economic opportunities during the Depression. And they were able to get really good, meaningful work and raise their family up and lift them out of poverty. And so, you know, it's just been a blessing to my family, the resources on those public lands and to be able to mine them.
And I've witnessed firsthand how much Utahns care about their own land and how much they use their own land. Every time I correspond with one of our Western lawmakers over the weekend, you guys are always out hiking, always out camping. And I know that the people of Utah would be the best stewards of Utah's lands.
May I just really quickly say thank you to both of you. It's a privilege to be here. And I'm reminded of Winston Churchill. He once said, you know, you can always count on America to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other alternative. And we would hope that in this case, we will recognize the truth and the liberty and freedom and constitutional alignment of what we've been talking about here today. Thank you, and keep up the good work. Sorry, Representative Bobby, didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. I would echo that. And Kat, it's good to know that you're a full-blooded Utahn, and Karla, you're a fully adopted Utahn. You're welcome here anytime. I would simply say to everyone across the nation, there is an economic, an environmental, and a constitutional renaissance waiting in the United States. If you think about what Jefferson did with the Louisiana Purchase, he unleashed an economic renaissance. And the key to that was simply freedom and trusting people to pursue happiness. The recipe is freedom. The recipe is that federalism that distributes power. And there is the environmental, economic, constitutional renaissance right there to benefit the entire nation. So thanks for helping us get the word out.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you next time on another ALEC TV live stream.
Thank you.